So you're the face of this, Andrew, not me.
That's a great shame, Mike.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. Are we live now? So bear with us, folks. I think we are live. So bear with us, folks, if you're just joining us. As you know, it takes a couple of minutes while I get this up to social media so we can get as many people in as possible. But Andrew, what's been happening since last time we chatted, which was at Boscombe Down Aviation Collection?
Yeah, it's I can't remember when that was, Mike.
I know, yeah,
So
me
I'm
too.
currently in. I know it goes so quick. I'm currently in Kuwait. I'm actually on my first work trip since I got COVID back in April. So I've been getting ready to come back to work with lots of refresher training in a simulator, and I've also flown the 18-meter national gliding competition at Lasham Gliding Society. So I've been busy with Flight Deck Wingman, the podcast, etc. So it's been a busy few weeks.
Brilliant. I saw like a couple of posts on your social media. You've been gliding with Mandy Hickson as well. How did that come about?
Yeah. Have you interviewed Mandy yet?
I have, a while ago. Yeah, she's been on a few Q&As as well.
Yeah, she's epic. So for anyone who doesn't know Mandy Hickson, she was, I think, the second ever female Tornado GR4 pilot. Yeah, so I took Mandy flying, and actually her husband is a guy called Craig Hickson, Hicko, obviously both Hickos, I suppose. And I was on holdover with Craig back in the 90s. Well, he was an instructor and pilot on the Hawks at Yeovilton, and he used to take me flying in that. So I got to take Craig flying while Mandy went flying with one of the Women's World Gliding Championship pilots, and me and Craig went flying. So we sort of did a bit of formation, a bit of thermaling together. It was quite good fun.
Oh, very nice.
She's great,
yeah.
Mandy. Yeah.
But so guys, get your questions coming in. Andrew is a former Hawk pilot and obviously Royal Navy Sea Harrier pilot. But Andrew, if you can maybe give us a bit of background on yourself, and just in case the guys haven't watched the interview, that'd be great.
Sure. And hello, everybody, as well. I can see a couple of people there that I recognise from other social media channels of mine. So again, like I said on the interview with Mike, I sort of caveat this by saying they were far more experienced and more distinguished Sea Harrier pilots than me, but I'd be very happy to answer your questions today on what it was like to fly, etc. I started flying when I was 16. Pretty familiar story for most sort of military fast jet pilots. I did a flying scholarship, and then I joined the Royal Navy, having failed to get into the Royal Air Force back in whenever it was the 90s. And joined the Navy around 1996, and went through all the standard sort of flying training process. A lot of which, of course, is done with the Royal Air Force. So I went through the elementary flying training on the T-67M. I went to RAF Lincoln News, flew the Tucano, and then RAF Valley, where I flew the Hawk T Mark 1 on both the advanced flying training and tactical weapons training. And I went to the Sea Harrier. I can see that Mike spelled my name incorrectly there on the. They call me Scrabble for good reason, and if you can see that, Mike, in the description of the YouTube channel, there's an extra U before the F, which isn't how you spell my name, but that's all right.
Yes, sorry about that. I'm going to correct that now, so apologies for that, Andrew.
I've had worse, but they did call me Scrabble for good reason, because my surname would apparently score quite well in Scrabble. But then since I left the Royal Navy, I've been in the airline world, and I currently fly the 787. And I'm in Kuwait at the moment in the Gulf. And as you're looking at having interviewed John Nichol, I think we both interviewed John Nichol recently, Mike.
We did.
I saw some relics in a little glass cabinet today as I was heading out towards the swimming pool of things from this hotel was bombed in Desert Storm, and so I saw some old relics in this glass cabinet. So It's quite strange to be here. The last time I was here in 1998 on HMS Coventry on my initial sea training with the Royal Navy. So,
before we get into the questions, and guys, get your questions coming in, because this is going to be an absolutely amazing hour. But as you can see on the left-hand corner, you're also, you run a podcast it's called For Flying Out Loud. Can you tell us a bit about this, Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's kind of you, because Mike is the expert in interviewing, particularly military pilots that you do. But yeah, for Flying Out Loud's been going about a year now, and I've interviewed lots of really cool people. Yeah, John Nichol I just mentioned, the most recent retiree RAF Red 1 Purty. I've interviewed F-35 lead test pilots, Commander Nathan Gray, first to land on HMS Queen Elizabeth. I've got a whole bunch of interesting guests coming up. It's a different style of podcast than Mike's. We'd look at sort of inspirational stories and etc. rather than focusing on so much on the flying. But yeah, for Flying Out Loud, I appreciate you mentioning that, Mike. That's really kind. So go and check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely. Again, I apologise for spelling your name wrong there. It's been a long day, Andrew. But
it's still wrong now. It's still wrong now. You've corrected it. It should be Neofytou. Yeah. And again, Scrabble. Yeah, that's.
There we go. Sorry, guys.
It's great
been
to
a long day.
anyway.
I've been up since 5 o'clock today, so but sorry about that, Andrew. But as you can see, there's some questions coming in there. So, Andrew, I'm going to let you loose and enjoy.
Okay, I'll speak to you. I guess Mike's going to join us again later to say goodbye. Thanks, Mike. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining in. And as I say, I'm a former Navy Sea Harrier pilot. One of a small group of pilots, and lots of the Sea Harrier guys did a lot more flying on it than I did. But I'm very happy to answer your questions today, so I'm going to sort of get stuck into some of those, and let's have a look. So, MKMD exploration and paranormal. God, that sounds interesting. What was the trickiest manoeuvre to execute in a Harrier? So for me, I found the sort of initially, at least anyway, was the transitioning to and from hovering flight, which I covered in the interview I did with Mike at Aircrew interview a few weeks ago. So this transition, particularly initially for me, away from hovering flight into wing-borne flight, was quite a challenge. And if you got it wrong, then it would go wrong really, really quickly. So you had to be very careful, for example, to not move the nozzles aft too quickly as you're accelerating away. And also, whenever you're going either to hovering flight or transitioning away from it, to keep the vane or the ball in the middle. If not, the aeroplane, for various aerodynamic reasons, would yaw very quickly and potentially flip upside down, being a secondary effect of yaw. So yeah, that was probably a pretty tricky manoeuvre to execute in a Harrier. Dion Oggerman, who I think I recognise from my Instagram channel at Flight Deck Wingman, he said, what made you go from flying the Hawk to the airlines? So I actually went Hawk, then I went to the Sea Harrier, then I went to the airlines. Unfortunately for me, I lost my ability to fly on medical reasons in the Navy. So I had 2 spinal operations, which meant that I could no longer fly fast jets. So that's what happened to me. Meant I left a little bit earlier than I should have done. But that's the reason for that. This is life, though. Cool. So back 21, some good knowledge here. What was your opinion of the Sea Harrier or the Shah's Blue Vixen radar? Yeah, I mean, it was a real, obviously our primary role on the Sea Harrier was air defence, and working the radar was key to being successful at being an air defence pilot. Blue Vixen was ahead of its time in its time. I'm certain now that radars have moved on quite a bit, but it was a very, very good radar. Obviously, without talking like super specifics on it, had things called track while scans, so we could actually look at other aircraft, look for other aircraft rather, whilst we were actually tracking a target to launch unmanned missiles against it. So it was, that in its time was pretty advanced. Most aircraft of that sort of generation could only, once they locked onto an aircraft, they could only look at that one aircraft, or at the very least, those other aircraft would know that you were looking at them. Whereas the Sea Harrier Blue Vixen radar, the only indication that other aircraft would get that we were looking at them was a very brief blip, as if they were being tracked in general terms, like a radar looking for other aircraft. So not firing loads of ergs from the radar at them, which would tell them that it had definitely been looked at. So it was actually a very good radar, but it required a lot of getting used to. And that was quite challenging, knowing where to point the radar, knowing what was what we call clutter on the radar, what was actual targets on the radar. So yeah, it was a good radar, but it took a lot of getting used to. Let's have a look. Mike said there'd be a lot of questions. There are loads coming in. Yeah, Scrabble, love it. Thanks, Byron. Appreciate that's my nickname, Scrabble. And you also say VIFing. Is that everything you would consider in reality? So yeah, VIFing, vectoring and forward flight. It was something you could use in air combat. Generally speaking, because the Sea Harrier didn't have reheat, no Harrier has reheat. So once you've lost your energy, it's very difficult to get it back again. So you quite commonly would end up in a sort of min radius fight rather than a rate fight. You could use VIFing in a couple of ways. One was to give you a little nudge of the nose of the aircraft, so you could sort of knock it around very gently by pulling the nozzle lever back in a sort of radius fight, and that might be just enough to bring the nose to bear and to get the winders to lock onto the aircraft that you were after. And the other thing you could use VIFing in was what we call breaking stop barrel roll. So if you could get into a position without using my hands on this video, because I'll get bantered by any amount of pilots that are watching this. So if you could force what they call a fly through, so if there was an aircraft behind you and you could force it to fly through your aircraft path. So if you were sort of going straight ahead, ideally you'd force an aircraft to fly 90 degrees sort of through your direction of travel. Out and somewhere out in front of you, approximately, then you could obviously get behind them and shoot them down. You could increase the fly through by using the nozzles and VIFing them in a breaking stop barrel roll. So you pitch your airplane up into a barrel type maneuver, and at the top of the barrel roll, you could bring the nozzles pretty much all the way forward if you wanted to. That would sort of kill your forward speed. You keep the roll coming as you rolled out. That fly through would become even greater. You'd roll out behind someone. Of course, doing that and slowing down to that degree, upside down in a situation like that, if you get it wrong, you're sitting duck, really. So more of a last-ditch thing, I would say, than using it day to day. Very hard to describe all that stuff without fighting sticks, actually. So someone says, it's MKMD again, says, how many Sea Harrier pilots or Naval Aircrew did the All Arms Commando course? And what was the purpose for it? I remember seeing a picture of a Sea Harrier pilot with a Commando Dagger whilst in the cockpit. Well, actually, the couple of total legends, obviously, Royal Marine pilots that came onto the Sea Harrier. And both those guys already had their green berets, of course, and I flew with both those guys on the front line. Top pilots, really good guys. And then one of my other mates who Mike was talking about at the beginning there that I've interviewed on my podcast was Nathan Gray, who was an F-35 test pilot, first to land on Queen Elizabeth. But before we did all that, he was on the OCU with me at Yeovilton, and Nath went off after flying a Sea Harrier and did his all-arms course as well. So, yeah, there are a bunch of people with a green beret, so that answers that question. Timberwolf says, Andrew, thanks for talking with us. The Harrier had tough competition in the air-to-air. Can you talk about how you would execute attacks and how you speak on any Goliaths you slew? I'm not sure I did a slew any particular Goliaths, but let's have a go. So, I mean, the Sea Harrier did pretty well, predominantly because of the radar missile combination. So the Blue Vixen that we were just talking about and the AMRAAM missile was quite a potent combination. And actually, at the time I was flying the Sea Harrier, it was pretty much the only aircraft that was the first to get the AMRAAM missile. It was pretty much the only aircraft using that sort of combo. Because the Blue Vixen was so good for various reasons that I can't chat about on here, we gave a very good account of ourselves against lots of aircraft. So thinking of aircraft like the mighty F-15E, for example, huge weapons platform, very, very capable aircraft. But it wasn't uncommon for us to go 2v4 against 4 F-15s and actually do pretty well against them. So yeah, it was a pretty potent combo of aircraft. And of course, we didn't just use the radar to launch AMRAAM missiles. The radar could also be used to lock onto another target, particularly in close combat, and to then slew the sidewinder head to look where the radar was looking. So, and that could be quite an amount of degrees off the actual flight path of my aircraft. I could be looking quite a bit away from it, at another aircraft and then lock it on and then sleeve the head of the sidewinder to look at that aircraft. So some pretty cool tech using that missile, even though it was sort of old tech, I'm sure, compared to what we've got in the F-35 and stuff now. Josh Bayliss says, hi Andrew, when at Yeovilton would you train over the Bristol Channel? Yeah, absolutely, Josh. So most of our training grounds for going up and practicing that type of BVR stuff and then air combat stuff was done over the Bristol Channel way. And so we commonly head out of Yeovilton, head west, climb up fencing and go off and do our stuff over the Bristol Channel. So yeah, pretty common to be there. Keep the questions coming, guys. I'm enjoying these. Thank you. I hope it's all making sense. Tom says, what were the living conditions like on a carrier? Yeah, pretty good, really, I would say, overall. I mean, the only thing with life on the boat is, and not that I did a huge amount of time on the boat, but life doesn't stop, really. So you don't really get days off as such. You know, there's always something happening. There's always pipes going on, some sort of message, and you're always busy. But actually, pretty good, actually. I interviewed a friend of mine who went from flying the GR9s, flying F-18s with the US Navy on exchange. And although he said that he enjoyed the flying side of things more and how sort of much more, I think he might be tuning into that actually if you're there, Scrambag. But he said he enjoyed life flying out in the States, but he enjoyed living on UK aircraft carriers far more. But yeah, life on the carrier was okay. Right, let's have a look. What else have we got? So someone said, hi Andrew, I'm a hang glider pilot. That's from Steve Lehman. And he knows a couple of hangies that used to be fast jet pilots. Yeah, I'm thinking Schwabby. It's the guy that I first went flying in a T8 Harrier with. He's a hang glider pilot. He said both said that gliding feels the most like pure flying. How high have you got in wave lift? That's mountain wave lift. Yeah, so those that know me, I am now a mad keen competition glider pilot, racing other gliders around the sky. Which is a lot more exciting than it sounds. I haven't been that high flying in mountain wave lift actually, but I am planning a trip up to North Wales in a few weeks to go and try and get up to 20,000 feet if I can. But yeah, if you haven't tried gliding, go and check it out. I love it. It is actually some of the most fun flying I've ever done, believe it or not. Byron says, happy as a single seater. Ever would have liked a second pair of eyes in the Sea Harrier. Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, actually, our tactics and the picture from the Freddies, the flight controllers on the ground, and communicating with each other, and then I think the only thing that would have improved the picture, if you like, would have been having something like JTIDs. So that ability to data link, share information between cockpits, that might have been really, really useful. I guess in close air combat it might be useful to have another pair of eyes as well, but that wasn't the game I was in, and so I can't tell you how much more useful it would have been, but undoubtedly having more eyes would have been more useful than not. John Minter says, when flying a Sea Harrier, who was your most difficult opponent in dissimilar air combat training? My first week or two on the front line, we went out to Poland on an exercise called Polish Dancer, and one of the aircraft we were working with were the MiG-29s, the Polish Air Force, and yeah, they were pretty immense in the close air combat regime, not least because the jet was just epic. It's got burners. It could just like pull these sort of aircraft. They almost look like they're not flying like normal aeroplanes. They sort of turn on the spot. Compared to the Harrier, and they also had helmet-mounted sight for the winders and stuff, so they could just look, just like I was saying with using the radar to lock onto another aircraft. They could just look, and the helmet-mounted sight would tell the sidewinder where to look. So, monstering in us in terms of rate of turn, but also with the helmet-mounted sight, I'd say the MiG-29 was pretty epic. Cool. Wow, loads of questions, Mike. You were right. I'm trying to keep track because I keep jumping. So, John says, do you recognise me? Yeah, I do recognise you from I know most of my social media followers, actually. I do try and get to know most of them, particularly the ones that comment on my Flight Deck Wingman Instagram channel. What's your opinion on typhoons? Joe, I've not flown one, but I'm amazed actually how that aircraft has kept developing. It's going through various evolutions, and it's a lot. I know a lot of people have flown it. I can't speak on any particular proficiency about what it's Typhoon's like, but I would like to have had a go on one. That's for sure. I think it's still a great aircraft, and cost-wise, next to something like the F-35, it's a different game, and it's still obviously very, very capable. Nell's retracted his message, Mechanical Man Cave. I don't know why he's retracted it, but let's have a look. So, Jack is smiling. Says, were the GR3 and the FA2 particularly different aerodynamically, or was the good air-to-air performance of the FA2 primarily due to the kit on board? Yeah, I don't think there was a great deal of difference between the GR3 and the FA2. And I'll tell you why I know that, because at Yeovilton, there was what we call the Harrier graveyard. So there were there were some GR3s in there, and it wasn't uncommon to see a GR3 that had a bit of metal panel missing that was then found on a Sea Harrier. So there were parts of the GR3 that were definitely common to the Sea Harrier. In terms of wing area, etc., not a great deal of difference. The Sea Harrier FA2 went through some evolutions and changing. The fuselage got longer because that's where they stored the processor for the radar, so the fuselage got a bit longer. Obviously the nose got a bit bigger, but in terms of sort of wing area and how they fly, again, not flown the GR3, but I don't think there were a great deal difference. So certainly first generation Harrier. Whereas you move on to the GR9, and my mates that flew that, those that flew the Sea Harrier and the GR9 said not only was GR9 somewhat easier to fly, but in terms of things like wing area, much bigger on the GR9, engine performance better, flaps bigger, etc., stall flaps, all sorts of stuff that was better on the GR9. So yeah, I don't think the GR3 and FA2 are particularly different in terms of performance and aerodynamics. So Kane Davidson says, I've seen different sources claiming that Fleet Aeron pilots were the best in the world. Would you agree? Don't know if I can answer that, but yeah, listen, I would say that any fast jet pilot that makes it to the front line is generally a very good pilot. Fleet Aeron, I don't know. Single seat flying on the front line of Fleet Air Arm is particularly challenging. So hopefully we're up there with the best in the world, but I'm not going to say we're the best. Steve Lewis says, did you ever do any DACT against F-14 Tomcats? If so, did you get on? No, I didn't actually. I do remember seeing some F-14s on a trip to Oceania when I was going through officer training. But I can't remember, perhaps one of the viewers here can tell me exactly when the F-14s went out of service. But no, I didn't. But that would have been epic because that would have been just like Top Gun. So, no, sadly. Okay, so ADMB again says, what was it like flying with a damaged canopy at height and at speed? Yeah, so I'm guessing you've seen the video interview that I did with Mike at Aircrew interview a few weeks ago. So whilst I was on the operational conversion unit, I had a couple of major emergencies. One was an engine failure where it transpired the jet had shed a compressor blade, first stage compressor blade, which had gone through the rest of the engine, severely damaging the engine. In fact, had an 8-stage compressor and the last 3 stages were pretty much completely destroyed. But I managed, after 15,000 feet with no engine, to get it restarted, although it didn't produce a great deal of power. The next emergency, a few months later, was my canopy at about 29,000 feet, around about 0.89 max, something like that. The huge explosion, essentially the canopy had failed, it shattered, parts of that went down the engine, damaged the engine, and I found myself, initially felt like I couldn't breathe. It was like someone had kicked me in the chest with both their feet, sort of all the air, because the rapid explosive decompression left my body. My canopy got blown, visor rather got blown back, even though it should be locked by the winds, and very, very noisy. So the first thing I did was to lower my seat because I thought if I get any part of me near the outside of this aircraft, it's going to be ripped off. So Yeah, that was a pretty challenging day out. IMC over the Bristol Channel. The person asking questions about that earlier, and I flew an approach into RAF St Athan with my wingman. I managed to land the jet, but yeah, it was noisy, very cold. I had bits of perspex that got in my face. I had windburn on my eyelids, so my eyes were quite sore. And trying to fly in close formation in the rain with sore eyes was not particularly easy. But anyway, all's well that ends well. That was an exciting day out. Vic Saney says, was the Harrier stressed for higher Gs than the normal RAF Harriers? Yeah, it wasn't a G monster. Most fast jets will have different amounts of G you can pull depending on the config of the aircraft. So whether you got drop tanks on, what weapons you got on board, etc. We're going back 15 years now at least. I'm trying to remember. I think the Sea Harrier, generally speaking, on drop tanks. So whilst we still had fuel in the big drop tanks, it was only about 4.5 G, 4.5 G. Once we got off drop tanks, it increased to about 6.5 G. I don't know what the GR9 G limits were. If anyone's on here that flew GR9, perhaps you can let us know. But it wasn't a big G aircraft, not like something like the Typhoon where you regularly pull 9 G. Timberwolf says UAP UFO are being investigated by US Congress. Have you or your fellows ever seen or been vectored against anything strange like the 4 US Nimitz F-18 crews? Tornado pilots say you saw a bogey dart speed. No, I've never seen any UFOs, but I do spend quite a lot of time looking out the window on a 787 now. So I'll let you know if I see anything. But no, never vectored in on any UFOs. No. Reinhardt. So the Taliban don't have any Harrier jets. Please tell us a VIFing story. I think we talked about VIFing there. So Reinhardt was chatting a bit about VIFing earlier. Generally speaking, we didn't use a lot of VIFing, but occasionally you could use it as a bit of a last-ditch thing to try and force a fly-through of another jet and then sort of barrel roll in behind them, or you could use the nozzles just to kick the nose of the aircraft around a little bit, which might allow you to bring the nose to bear onto your target. David Ayu says, hope I'm not going too quickly through these questions. Everyone, please keep them coming. If you've got any questions on handling the Harrier or flying a Hawk or anything like that, or taking off on the boat or whatever, please feel free to ask them. David says, Andrew, given missile technology advances, how much of a factor is the aircraft and air-to-air combat? The latest gen fighters like the F-35 that my mates flown, that's a completely different way of flying. Something that I'm just, I've pretty much no knowledge of how these guys fly these aircraft these days. They're far more data platforms than they are perhaps, pure out and out fighters. Of course, they do pretty much a good job on both things. I think as time goes on, we'll find the aircraft is less and less of a factor. We're talking about drone technology, drones flying alongside things like F-35s. Why put pink bodies in harm's way if you don't need to? But missile technology, even the AMRAAM version that we use on the Sea Harrier is pretty advanced tech and capable of keeping you a very good distance away with a big stick, particularly against some of the older aircraft that didn't have AMRAAM missiles. But I think, as tech moves on, the aircraft are going to become less and less of a factor. Someone says, talk to me, Goose, you're my ice goose. I don't know if anyone's ever been called Goose apart from in Top Gun. Ian says, Andrew, any souvenirs or mementos kept from your Sea Harrier days? I've got a couple of things. I've got my old office from operational flight training, little office door. What do you call it? Like little plaque on my office at home. I've got a compressor blade from my engine that failed with a little dink in it, a small little dink in it from the main failed one that completely came off. But I've got a little dink in it from the damage that the other blade did to it. And actually one of the instructors at the time, a guy called Gary, he very kindly mounted that blade on a little wooden plinth, which sits next to a green endorsement I got for that emergency. So, and I've got loads of I've got loads of squadron badges. I've got badges from other people at air shows and stuff when you've had a few beers and you swap badges. So, a few things. Definitely good memories. Josh Bayliss says, does the Navy recruit fewer pilots than the Royal Air Force? Well, typically, yes, I would say so, because although all of the military is shrinking, the Air Force does more flying and has more aircraft than the Royal Navy does. But if anyone's thinking about going and joining the force, a lot of people don't think about joining the Royal Navy as a pilot. I was one of those people. I didn't really realise it. I guess I just thought, hey, it's just the Air Force that fly fast jets. We are going back 25 years though. But definitely consider all three services. John Minter, if you could fly any Fleet Air-on fighter aircraft, past or present, apart from the Sea Harrier, what would you choose? That's super easy. Sea Fury. Every day of the week. I was very lucky to go and visit Ultimate Warbird flights up at Sidewell near Northampton just a week ago. And one of my mates is a guy called Andy. He was also a GR9 pilot. And he's now a current airline pilot, but also flies Warbirds. And we got to sit in everything from an Hispano Bouchon and Spitfires and all sorts of stuff. But they had a Sea Fury there in the hangar that was having a bit of maintenance. And that just looks like an epic aeroplane. And Andy informs me that it's very, very light, even on the ground, and nimble and in the air. For such a big aeroplane, it's incredibly capable. So a Sea Fury, if I could fly something. If I was good enough to go and fly a Sea Fury. So Byron says, best exercise or detachment and why? I think probably my first one on the front line, because it was just such a baptism of fire. Again, there were Sea Harrier pilots did way, way more than I ever did on Sea Harrier, so I just want to get that out there. But I remember basically completing the last flight on the OCU, and then the very next day flying out to Poland on the wing of the Boss, and landing into Poland, and then the very first flight that I spoke about on the recent interview with Aircrew interview was against 4 Su-22 fitters at low level over Poland. And it was me and a mate of mine called Judge, and we took 2 Sea Harriers up against these 4 Su-22 fitters. And it was just like proper Cold War stuff, because it was out over almost like tundra over Poland. And we'd already fired off rams or slammers, as they're called, against all 4 of these aircraft. So in reality, they would have been gone. But we merged with them anyway. And just seeing these jets plugging in a burners, trying to poke away very quickly from us, that was a real high. And I remember getting back, and actually I was so sort of like full of beans that the boss had to tell me to just shut up, basically, because they were out briefing. But it was a great flight. MKMD again, those are cool questions coming in. Did you manage to rip fast jet pilot on his attempts to land the Harrier on so that's Tim Davis and his Fast Jet Performance channel. I think he was flying a simulator Harrier. Tim and I actually joined the Royal Navy together before Tim went off and started flying with the Air Force on the Tornado. He's a great guy, and I saw his attempts to land a Harrier on the aircraft carrier. It was quite amusing. Rob Freely says, Art Knowles is selling his Harrier fleet. Are you tempted? Not for any amount of money in the world, quite honestly. So no, I'm not tempted to go and fly the Sea Harrier again. I think I was lucky enough to get away with it as long as I did without having to jump out of it. So no, thank you. Mike, you got a beautiful couple of comments down there. Let's not give that person the time of day. So Steve says, did you ever fly down a Mat Loop? I've seen Hawks from Valley come down there and it looked awesome. Excuse me. Mat Loop, that was a pretty common sort of training area in Wales. So yeah, Mat Loop is pretty awesome. I know there's loads of cool photographers that go down there and get some awesome pics. I don't think I've got one of me there, sadly, or maybe there is one out there somewhere. But yeah, Mat Loop's awesome. And also some of the flying around Scotland, Star Wars Valley, etc. Amazing flying. Tim, can you talk about any red flag story, if relevant, or combat sortie red flag etc. So I didn't fly red flag. I think 800 Squadron went out to red flag around the time that I was flying, but I haven't flown in red flag. But it sounds like an absolutely epic detachment. So no, I'm afraid I haven't got any stories on that. Jackie Smiley says, as I understand it, the Hawk provides good natural feedback to the pilot when max performing the aircraft. Did the Harrier do the same, or would it depart suddenly with little or no warning? Yeah, I mean, the Hawk is the T Mark 1 I flew, just like a really delightful aeroplane to fly. Very, very easy to fly. It's to be a little bit careful in the circuit, particularly easy to pull a bit too hard on files and stall it. But in terms of handling, really, really nice airplane, really simple to fly, very responsive. You can see why, the Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team, Red Arrows, use the Hawks, a great aeroplane. I guess stepping from a Hawk into a Harrier, it's hard to describe. It's a bit like going from a Golf GTI into a BMW M Series, I suppose. It's a bit like that. It feels bigger, feels more purposeful. Probably not quite as agile feeling as a Hawk, but yeah, the Hawk's a great aircraft. The Sea Harrier, if you got it wrong, and I have tried to do a bit of biffing and got it wrong, I have been going straight ahead 1 minute and then literally swapping ends and going backwards through the sky another minute and surging the engine. So you could get it wrong if you abused it, but like anything, flight within its limits, it generally behaves itself. Byron Fury says Sea Fury's a beast. Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Martin Chamberlain says, Andrew, what sort of glider do you fly and which is your favourite type? He's an ex-glider pilot. Yeah, I'm a Mad King glider pilot. Go and try it if you've never done it before. I fly a thing called a Ventus 2CXA with a front electric sustainer. So it's got a little motor on the front that gets me out of trouble should I need it. And my favourite type of glider, probably, my Ventus, to be honest with you. It's an amazing glider, although I have flown a thing called a JS1 built by a South African firm, which has got a little mini jet engine in the fuselage, again, to get you out of trouble if it all goes wrong. But yeah, probably the Ventus. They're all nice, though. All these gliders are epic. Jack is smiling, says mega Q&A, by the way. I hope so, my friend. I hope you're enjoying this. Any more questions? Technical question. How did you align the inertial nav system on startup at sea? Yeah, well, it's I can't remember the exact mechanics of it. We all had what we call embarked ops gouge. So on my knee pad, I'd have stuff for all sorts of stuff. It might be rule of thumbs for missiles. It might have been rule of thumbs for dive bombing, level bombing, etc. And then another one was this embarked ops gouge. And because we didn't embark all the time, we did more flying on land than sea generally, it wasn't something that was super familiar. So we'd work through this embarked ops gouge, actually step by step at every single stage of the process, sign the aircraft out, get into the jets, check in, start the jets, etc., right up to the point where you launch. And one of those things was to align the inertial nav kit. If you didn't align a nav kit, then you get lost. So basically, because the ship's going in one direction at a certain speed, and for those of you that remember seeing the Sea Harriers on the back of the Invincible carrier, you'd see them all that I was embarked on. See the jets sort of ranged around the back of the boat. So not all of them are pointing in the same direction that the boat is travelling. So essentially, you've got the aeroplane pointing one direction, the ship pointing another direction, that going at a certain speed. So if you didn't align the nav kit properly, then your inertial nav kit could be drifting at the speed that the boat was travelling at the time you aligned it, and offset by the amount of degrees you were not pointing away from the direction the ship was travelling. So you could be like 30 degrees off, travelling at 38 knots, and your nav kit would drift like that. And of course, after a while, you'd no idea where you are. So we go through a process to tell it what our heading was, what the ship's heading was, what speed the ship was doing, etc. And that would essentially make sure that the inertial nav system was aligned appropriately. In fact, I think we had an American exchange pilot who, I may have this wrong, so forgive me if I have, but I think made an error aligning the inertial nav kit and actually couldn't find a boat on the way back because the nav kit had drifted. And they did find an airfield to land at, but they didn't make it back to the boat. Right, let's have a quick look. So bonsoir as well, T Beagler 75. Lewis Gaylord, hey mate, good to see you. Nice to see you on here. Pretend racing cars. That's what I just answered. I think Jonathan Harris said have just had a Chinook buzz the house. What's the lowest you're allowed to fly? So typical low flying, as I'm sure you know, in the UK is down to 250 feet. There were places that you could go and practice operational low flying down to 50 feet. Over the sea, 30 feet. I'm sure there's guys that have been lower, but typically sort of low slot port on a ship where you fly past the ship and then sort of pull into the circuit. Yeah, you'd be down at sort of 30 feet. I mean, over the sea, there's no obstacles, so you can go pretty low. Yeah, and that's pretty fun at 500 knots. Mark Featherstone, very proud of our UK Air Force. And hopefully the Navy as well, Mark. However, it does make you sad to see our UK Air Force declining in size and significance compared to other countries. Does it make me sad? Yeah, I mean, obviously, I remember being a kid, and part of the reason I got into wanting to be a fast jet pilot was seeing loads of fast jets flying at low level, and it was like almost every day you'd see some tornadoes or Jags or something fly over the house. So yeah, although it's been a long time coming, but it's great to see naval air power return with the two aircraft carriers, Prince of Wales and Queen Elizabeth, and to see the F-35s there. So nice to see us having a presence back, particularly in the Navy. So yeah, I guess they're trying to keep the military lean, but I would like to see it increase in size. Of course, I would. John says, "Did you spin the Harrier?" No. In fact, it was difficult, if not impossible, to spin the Harrier. Although one of our squadron pilots, I think, did end up in a spin on a test flight and couldn't recover from the spin and ended up banging out the jet. So I seem to recall you had to jump out of the jet at something like 10,000 feet because the rate of descent was so fast in the spin, if it did spin, that you just wouldn't be able to recover it. So you just jump out at 10,000 feet, something like that. MKMD says, "Who is your inspiration in aviation?" Wow, there's been so many pilots that have inspired me along the way. The one that stands out the most to me is probably a guy called Alan Wade, and Alan is sadly no longer with us. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was an instructor of mine on elementary flying training, and Alan had... I'd known him since I was a little kid because he used to fly general. He was not a military pilot. He used to fly G8 flying where my dad did some PPL flying, and he also flew Warbirds. He displayed the Firefly T-67. His energy management was exceptional. His hand-eye coordination, his ability to fly an aeroplane was like genuinely probably the best I've ever seen. Yeah, really, really talented pilot. We'll shame that Alan's no longer here. And another pilot, tragically, is no longer here, was Martin Jack London. Probably one of the most experienced, gifted Harrier pilots, Sea Harrier pilots has ever been. Yeah, he was my instructor. He sent me solo on the Harrier. He did my first ever vertical takeoff hover solo monitoring. And yeah, unfortunately, Jack passed away in an accident at RAF Wittering back in 2002. But he was a very, very good pilot, really, really good pilot, and a lovely guy. So, any interesting stories from gliding? Nothing particularly interesting. Pretty exciting. Last month, as I said at the beginning, flew in the national gliding competition. There were 42 aircraft gliders competing in our class, and I was in thermal with 42 other aircraft, very, very close to each other. It's like nothing you've ever seen for those of you that fly. But yeah, and probably my interesting story, probably flying in South Africa on the edge of thunderstorms with rain coming out sideways out of these thunderstorms. Incredible lift, but also incredible sing. Lots of heavy rain, lots of lightning. And trying to get back to the airfield, and I literally landed, and within about 5 minutes of landing, there was 70 mile an hour gusts of wind and just torrential rain. So pretty lucky to make it back just in time. But yeah, great sport. Martin Peters says, really been enjoying the For Flying Out Loud podcasts. Listen to Birds of War episode, loved it. I appreciate that. Yeah, you can see the logo for my podcast there, For Flying Out Loud. And yeah, if you enjoy it, please consider buying me a coffee. You can find the link in the episode description so I can keep those coming. I do like making them, but they take a lot of time, 5 or 6 days per episode to research. But thanks very much for the feedback, Martin. The Action Aid ATCO. Even Andrew, when A201 disbanded in 06, saying goodbye to FAA, not counting Joint Force Harrier, what sort of impact did that have on you all? Did many elect to leave the Royal Navy? Yeah, so for me, that was the time I actually left the Royal Navy, although for me it was on medical grounds and not for any other reason. But yeah, I think quite a few people I interviewed, again, on my podcast, Simon Rawlins, Scrambag, who essentially we chat about it. He looked to leave the Navy and sort of did, and then actually came back and ended up being sent on exchange to fly F-18s in the States. So but it was a real shame, without getting too political, to see the end of Sea Harrier, the end of Joint Force Harrier, leaving us with this sort of gap in capability until recently. But yeah, quite a few people from the Sea Harrier did stay in. A lot went out on exchange. A lot went to test pilot type roles. But yeah, probably half left. But yeah, good to see naval air power returning, albeit in smaller numbers than it used to be. Steve Lehman says, what was a typical loadout for the Sea Harrier? Did he usually have external fuel tanks? Was air-to-air refuel something he did very often? Yeah, typically be 2+2, so that would be two AMRAAM missiles, two Sidewinder missiles, and then also two drop tanks. It depends what you're doing. We used to burn, off the top of my head, about, with the drop tanks, we had 8,000 pounds of fuel on, and at low level, you burn about 900 to 1,000 pounds every 10 minutes, something like that. So you're burning fuel pretty quickly at low level, and in the hover as well, of course. So yeah, we almost always flew with drop tanks. Air-to-air refueling, yeah, something we did do pretty often. And yeah, it's everyone loves a bit of jousting. So yeah, air-to-air refueling is pretty exciting. Ian Saxon says, carrier deck is one of the most dangerous places in the world to work. Is it? It's a question. Is it hard to concentrate on handling the aircraft with bodies running about all over the place? So when the sort of deck is live, if you like, there's not a lot of people running about on the deck. It's it's generally flying stations. Everything's very, very sort of not coordinated. I'm looking for the word. Begins with C, I think. But yeah, everyone's got their roles and responsibilities on the deck, and no one should be there that shouldn't be there. So you sort of know where everyone's meant to be. But yeah, it was a challenging environment, obviously, operating off the boat, particularly if the conditions got more challenging. So I've been out at a quarter of a mile from the ship, still really not able to see it in poor weather. Also, although the limits on sea state and the pitch and roll of the ship were pretty small, those just watching a ship pitch or roll by just a couple of degrees is quite a big movement, and moving across the deck in a hover to land could be quite challenging. You had to sort of tune out the fact that the ship was pitching up and down and moving, because it'd be very easy when you're looking at references across the deck to try and follow that movement, and then the jet would move up and down as you're going. So we would try and average out, sort of mean out where the ship movement, and just fly at a constant altitude as we move from the sea. We'd be hovering about 85 feet above the sea, so across the deck we'd be about 30 feet above the deck, and just sort of ignore what the ship was doing. But easier said than done, particularly if you've got a load of mates making gesticulating at you in a hover as you're about to land. The Iceman 95, good nickname, like it. What was the most fun type of flying you did with a Sea Harrier, and did you ever get near Mach 1 in it? Now, the Sea Harrier was not supersonic. From the evolution from the FRS-1 to the FA-2, they moved the probe from in front of the radome, which obviously couldn't interfere with the radar picture, so they moved it to two small probes behind the radome. And one of the sort of peculiarities of that was that we got above a certain speed, we actually didn't know how fast we were going. And obviously, if you don't know how fast you're going, you go too fast, the aeroplane might not survive. So again, top of my head, Sea Harrier max Mach was 0.92 Mach. In normal operations. So no, never did go supersonic in a Sea Harrier. Did go supersonic briefly in a Hawk. It was one of the sorties you do going through training, but it wasn't a supersonic jet. Timberwolf says, could you talk on any humorous deployed after hours fun with the Allied Air Forces while there? I remember the air shows is usually where you could have a few beers with people and have a few more beers than you probably should have. And I remember the Germans had some sort of contraption. It looked a bit, if anyone knows that game Mousetrap from the sort of 80s, we have all these various levers and gears and other stuff. And they had this thing they turn. It was beautifully engineered out of some sort of wood in Germany, and very German engineering. And you turn this handle, and everything would move. And at the end of it was this pile of snuff or something like that, which everyone would have to basically put the nose over and do this thing, and it would explode, and everyone would have a nosebleed. And I remember doing that on the wing of an F4 Phantom in Zeltweg, Austria, having had way too many beers in the sunshine, watching all these jets display. So it was that was a fun time. Air show is always good fun. We don't get to do them very often. Vic Saney says, do you have any opinion on the shades of sea grey camouflage using the Sea Harrier over the years in terms of effectiveness? Well, obviously I only saw the grey that the Sea Harrier was painted in. I can tell you that actually at altitude, that is a very, very good colour. There were times where jets were very close if there wasn't anything to distinguish them much against the background, and you wouldn't see them till late on. So yeah, it was a pretty good camouflage. Bat 21 said, do you think the Sea Harrier was retired too early? Yeah, I do think it was, because we're left with a sort of gap in capability. It was a AMRAAM firing jet. It might have been old tech in terms of the aircraft, but the radar weapon sort of combo was very good. So yeah, I do think it was retired too early. Yeah, definitely. Brainheart says, drone strikes and bird strikes did major damage to an aircraft. So how do commercial jets magically slice through the cast metal H-beams of the twin towers? Not sure I want to talk about going to the twin towers, I'm afraid, if that's okay. The Action Atco, Andrew, thanks for answering my question. Speak to you sometime from atop the large patio heater at Heathrow. Yeah, my pleasure, my friend. MKMD, do you have any fleet air arm traditions for specific occasions? As a little secret sort of Sea Harrier handshakes, which I'm going to talk you through. There's, just for comedy value, there's various toasts and stuff when we catch up at things like the Army Navy pre-beer beers that we'll do. But yeah, I mean, the Royal Navy is full of traditions for various things, from Jack Speak to all sorts of weird things. So I do miss that about the military, but I'm really lucky to have so many awesome friends from my time in the forces. So yeah. Steve says, what was your favourite kind of milk? Full fat or semi-skimmed? Don't like milk. Sorry, I drink almond milk these days, if that makes any sense. Mark says, when flying on a mission, did you encounter any enemy aircraft? Is it your decision when and if to fire? So for me on the Sea Harrier, I didn't go and do any live ops, which was not uncommon. Those guys that went off and flew the GR9 obviously did a lot of stuff, and I take my hat off to them. So I can't speak on any authority at all when it comes to live missions, but there'll be very, very strict rules of engagement. I do know that much. I mean, I guess the ultimate decision comes down to whether you're happy to pull the trigger, drop the bombs, fire the missiles. But yeah, I can't speak on any authority on that, I'm afraid. MKMD again, did you see the video of a US Harrier landing on the carrier with a nose wheel malfunction? So he landed with a nose on the cradle. Yes, I did. Yeah, awesome bit of flying. I think that guy obviously just keeping his nerve, really. I'd imagine that he didn't do anything different to what he'd normally do. But of course, if you know that the nose wheel isn't there, then there's a psychological challenge to get over and keeping you cool. And he definitely did that, and that was a really cool video. Martin Chamberlain, Andrew, what do you think of the new carriers? So I was lucky enough to go and take a look around HMS Prince of Wales, and walk up on a ski jump, look down over the deck, which is just immense compared to HMS Invincible. Yeah, the accommodation looked infinitely nicer than I remember on Invince. I quite like the two bridge setup as well. Big deck, massive, again in comparison to Invince aircraft hangar. So yeah, but again, I'm not operated off them. But if I could sign back up and go and fly an F-35 off one, I probably would. T Wizard, did you ever use the ramp at RAF Wittering? No, I didn't actually. So we had a ramp at Yableton, which had been there for quite a while. And when the GR9 started embarking upon the aircraft carriers, of course, there was another ramp built at Wittering. But going through the ACU, every Sea Harrier pilot would go to Wittering to sort of perfect their VSTOL handling. So taking off and landing on some of the taxiways, short runways, narrow runways, taking off and landing in Vigo pad, sort of in a wooded clearing. So, but I did obviously go off the ramp at Yableton in preparation for embarking on a boat. And in fact, we embarked 899 Squadron on the ship, which was quite unusual. So while we were still on the ACU, we went and embarked on the ship. And here's Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hello. Yeah. So, if you can maybe answer maybe 2 or 3 more questions while we wrap up this this Q&A. So if you've got a few more, get them in there and Andrew will hopefully answer them for you.
Thanks, Mike. Steve says, did you perform basic flight manoeuvres with the RAF Harriers? If so, what were the pros and cons of the Shah? Yes, we did. Of course, we had an air-to-air radar. They didn't. So, on a few occasions where I did it, we gave a good account of ourselves against the Giants. But then, so did those guys. Lewis Gaylord. So, Andrew, how good was Rob Schwab? Very good. Schwab is just he's just a really great guy to have around on the squadron. Great instructor. Got any tales? I can tell you about when I gave him the keys to my Subaru Impreza Turbo back in the early noughties, and that was an error. Although he didn't crash it, I think he nearly blew the engine up. Timberwolf says, what's your opinion on the direction fighter jets are taking? What do you believe anti-air will catch with stealth or vice versa? Will pilots be replaced? Will you also be seeing a new Top Gun? I'm definitely seeing a new Top Gun. Can't wait. I think why put people in cockpits if we don't have to? But I suspect it'll be a blend of stealth technology with bums on seats in the F-35, for example, with drones flying alongside those aircraft. I think that's probably the way we're going in the short to medium term. Mark Featherstone says, one more question. Would you always have the same wingman and get to know their flying style, or was it random? It was random, but quite honestly, the Sea Harrier force was so small that you knew everyone anyway. So I think on 801 Squadron, about 8 pilots when I left, so you pretty much knew everybody anyway. Andrew Brown says, what does the next fighter pilot drive in real life and in his dreams? I've got a Beamer estate, although I did have a Ford Focus estate which I sold for 56 quid to We Buy Any Car. In my dreams, I don't know what I drive in my dreams, to be quite honest with you. I'd rather buy another glider, but don't know, something like an Audi RS6. I think I'll probably have something like that because they sound nice. Another question on thrust vectoring. I've done quite a bit of that Camildon tonight, so maybe I think you can listen to this afterwards, so perhaps have a listen to it. MKMD, did you get much attention on board the carrier from the ladies? Not me. I was never very good. I'm still not very good at that sort of stuff, to be honest with you. Raw Power says his interviews are always too short. Great stuff. Thank you. My throat's getting sore from talking now, so I think we're almost approaching the end of the hour. I don't know if Mike's still there, but it seems like we've timed that beautifully, Mike, looking at that.
Yeah, we have indeed, yeah. So thank you very much for you guys to join us tonight in the Q&A. But Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. But if you can just let us know where we can find you online and your amazing, podcast for Flying Out Loud, where can we find you online?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter under Fly Steck Wingman. That's 3 separate words. Essentially, that's my little sideline business, helping pilots and future pilots pass airline and flight school selection processes. Watch this space for more exciting news from Flight Deck Wingman soon. Yeah, and the podcast for Flying Out Loud, you can find wherever you get your podcasts. I'd really appreciate it if you do enjoy those, so I can keep them coming. Consider buying me a coffee, and the links in the episode description of each episode of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the links are in the description below, guys. So if you want to go and follow Andrew and, follow what he's doing, go and do that. But Andrew, thank you very much for coming on this Q&A. It's been absolutely amazing. It's been brilliant.
That's my pleasure, Mike. You'll have to tell me what to do now. I'm not very good with technical stuff. Do I hang up on the call with you?
We're going to end it there. So thank you very much, guys. And yeah,
Thank
enjoy.
you so
Cheers.
much for the questions. Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.